as our 2x2 formation. Road change now, we go racing for the first time this season. 3 hours of GT action, it's go.
This is very tight as they come down. Group of cars coming in, this has all got trouble written all over it. This is G3 cars.
Drop downhill, they head towards the Aqua Minerale. Imola, of course. There's another one off through the gravel. As wide as possible as they drop downhill, putting that from the inside line. Yes,
Oh, he did.
Through he goes.
Good evening everybody and welcome back to another Apex Online Racing stream here for round 7 of the Tier 1 division of the AOR Sprint Cup Championship here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. Now, for the regular viewers of this channel, you may know that this is not Rage introducing the stream, it is John Watts from Tier 2. Unfortunately, Rage nor Saf could be in the stream tonight, so you are stuck with me, but joining me in the commentary box to make his official AOR debut is Tetra. So welcome, my good friend, how are you?
I'm very good, also good evening from my side. Very excited to get to commentate this race, penultimate race of the season. It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely, and the way that the championship has really set itself up in Tier 1, we seriously could have a battle going all the way down to that finale, because looking at George Boothby on our screen at the moment, he's just come in from doing some laps. Currently our championship leader, and interestingly enough, the only driver in the top 5 not to have a race win so far this season, which when you consider that he's the previous season champion, he's always so fast, he puts on these brilliant series of strategies and incredible defensive driving, incredible aggression, controlled aggression at times, and yet somehow he finds himself leading the championship without having a race win so far. So a really unusual situation to find ourselves in from our perspective, and I'm sure maybe a side that he's not quite so used to either.
He definitely showed a consistency so far this season. Most drivers have had their on and off races. So if we look at Tortellini and P3, he had this 21st place in Hungary. And George didn't really do that. He had a 10th place in Hungary. That's his worst finish so far this season. So the consistency is what's keeping him up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was kind of the similar sort of position we saw Tinko van der Velde in Tier 1 last season. I think he ended up finishing in 3rd or 4th position in Championship by the end, and I don't believe he actually got a podium until maybe the final race of the season, but he was always just hanging around those really kind of big points paying positions, and in the end it was that consistency that paid off, as it looks like we're going to be heading into qualifying now. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they get on tonight. And in terms of the sort of lap times and the cars that maybe we're expecting to be fast around here, in the practice session I actually thought that the McLaren wouldn't be particularly strong around Zolder, because the amount of aggression that you have to have with some of these really high-sided curves, there's some really tricky section of chicane that they're about to come up to now. You almost just completely straight line it and just almost ignore the left and right's existence. You just fly over those sausage curbs, and as you see everyone bumping all over, and Gregor Schill actually taking complete shortcut there, not wanting to risk puncturing his tyres before we've even begun qualifying. But the McLaren, a very low car with a very shallow ride height. It's not one that you would naturally assume would be all too fast around here, but George in practice was looking quick, and so was the likes of Niels Narks and the BMW. Massier was looking quick as well. Oh, we already got a spinner. I think that's Jardier. On the formation lap as well, of all things. And yeah, Jardier just returned to the pit, so well, that's certainly not the way he would have wanted to start the session. It was getting quite busy between everybody anyway, but that is a very unideal way for him to, I'm not actually sure if unideal is a word, but it's certainly a non-ideal way to start his qualifying session, but already chaos making its way into this race.
Already also stayed a few minutes in the pit, saw the car bumping up and down a bit, so he probably made some setup changes. Maybe didn't quite get the car right, but we also know not Jardier's favorite track. I think he was complaining earlier that why we couldn't do 90 minutes at Spa instead of Zolder. But also, of course, we talked about a close championship. He's 14 points behind George, trying to maybe chase the championship win. So he will need to get a good qualifying lap, also because it is tricky to overtake here on this track, and try to maximize the points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be crucial for him to get a good result if he wants to remain in that championship hunt, and not let George kind of run away a little bit too much before we get to the finale, where it's going to be McLaren around Silverstone for the final race of the season, and that is, well, up until recent kind of updates and BOP changes, the McLaren was effectively just, you couldn't challenge it around Silverstone. It's still incredibly strong. I think the likes of the BMW has got pretty good around there, and I think Massier was running for, I think Massier and George were actually running for Yas Heat in an endurance race at Silverstone in the Porsche, so there might be some setup sharing that goes on a little bit that could help Jardier out a bit on that front, but certainly in kind of the general, as I think actually there was a Porsche of Votnire in the background that spun potentially on the exit of the chicane. I saw a car sideways into the wall, so that's not too ideal for him. But yeah, going into Silverstone, Jardier really needs to kind of get a good boost of points if he really wants a realistic opportunity to take that fight to George in the closing stages of this championship. But looking at this grid in the meantime, obviously still early stages of this qualifying session, but we have quite an interesting mixture of cars at the front. We've got Trevor Wenham currently leading the way on a 27.2, so that's a solid effort from him, with Niels Narks behind him in P2. As also in the chat to go alongside that, seeing some support for BS competition in the chat, as well as some support for you, Tetra, making your debut. So nice comments there from people watching the stream so far. But an interesting mix of cars at the pointy end of the field at the moment as well.
I'm really surprised by Wenham just sticking in P1 at this early on. Kind of been a dark horse so far this season. Not that great results, because he had P3 podium position finish in, I think it was Donington. But other than that, mostly in the P16, P18, P20, and then of course won last race at Spa. So maybe trying to get that run of good form going, and maybe he has a part to play in this race, trying to challenge the front runners.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a factor that you have to kind of bring into the championship aspect. Sometimes these guys that maybe haven't had the most consistent of season, but we know how fast they can be. Someone, for example, Hugo Merles has really kind of come out of nowhere in his championship. He didn't have the greatest of results for the first couple of races, and I don't think he attended a few in the middle. But at Spa, there was a point during that race where he was seriously within a good chance of winning and still came away with a very strong podium finish. And again here at Zolder, managing to get good performance at the moment with that Ferrari in P6. And Ferrari, again, a car that's generally quite unsettled by curbs and is maybe not going to be the nicest one to drive around here for the duration of 90 minutes, but he's doing very well at getting good pace out of that. And another car that's been able to show its hand a bit at the moment around here is the Nissan GTR in the hands of Yuri Petrochenko. Had a bit of a wobbly start to the season, but he's found some pretty consistent and good form as of late. And again, that's a car that we don't generally see a lot when it comes to the sort of the pointy end of racing on ACC. The BOP just doesn't tend to lend itself very nicely towards the Nissan GTR, and this hasn't benefited from a custom BOP or anything. This is just good, solid performance that Yura's managing to get out of that car, and you know, he's potentially looking to start quite nicely within the top 10. So that is certainly a good prospect for him. And in the meantime, sort of reviewing the order of cars at the front, we've currently got Maciej Malnowski that has taken a huge amount of curve through that chicane there. I think may have potentially run a bit wide. No, it's flashing the light, so I think this lap is still valid, but you can just see the huge amount of commitment that these guys are putting into trying to get lap time out, and the amount of time that you can gain or lose by just throwing at those curves is absolutely huge. But he's currently sitting in provisional pole, and with Niels now sitting behind him, and a name that has sort of dropped slightly out of the frame in recent times. We've got McCormack sitting in P3, so he'll be looking to try to give himself a little bit of redemption and put himself back up towards the pointy end as well. But so far, Porsche, BMW, and a trio of McLaren. So definitely quite an interesting group of cars we've got at the front, as well as a Bentley of Shermatinsky, who I think may have been promoted, if I'm not mistaken, from Tier 2 last season. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, Bentley hasn't particularly featured too much at the front in recent times, but he's managing to get some good performance out of it here. Zolder, a very nice track for the Bentley, so it's good to see that car make its way into the top 10 for now as well.
I'm very glad we can see both the Bentley and the GTR in the top 10 right now. I'm not quite sure. I think actually Petrochenko is the only driver to drive the GTR this season. Also only 2 Bentleys on the grid, so very nice to see them up there today. I think early on the season, before the season started, we were all kind of afraid it's going to turn into a BMW championship. Because thankfully KUNOS fixed that just a few days before the season started. But right now we have a pretty good mixture between cars in the top 10 for McLaren, so they are definitely the stronger car around here. But I don't think the car will be the deciding factor today necessarily. We talked about it earlier before the stream started. The curbs around here, around this track, really a big factor. Track limits over 90 minutes will play a part. We already are seeing quite a lot of people going to the limit, going over the limit. So they're going to be punishing.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you know, like we said with George Busby, the one thing that he has brought so far this season, more so than anyone around him, has been that consistency. So that's what he'll be looking for. But he's certainly put himself in a good position for the time being, sitting in provisional pole by about 10th and a half. Just seeing what Mats Lindholm Andersen can do as he crosses the line. P6 provisionally for him, so another McLaren making its way up there, and an interesting livery for him. We have a McLaren with a Porsche WEC inspired skin on there. Also, just to answer some of the questions in the chat, I would love to show the timings on the board, I'm afraid, but I do all of this on a single monitor, believe it or not, and I'm terrified of pressing various buttons and it triggering other things in other applications rather than showing the lap time. So I'm afraid that I shall just have to do my best to keep you all up to date on the sort of margins that we're looking at So I do apologise on that front. But to give you a recent update, Niels Naut almost managing to get himself within a tenth of George Boothby, but and getting himself up to provisional P2. So he'll be looking to get some time out of that lap. And I'll tell you what, someone's on a really good lap at the moment. If he can carry that margin to the end. I think he lost a little bit on the exit there. Hugo Merles was 4 tenths up at one point. Is still going to be able to move him up to P7, but if he'd managed to carry that margin to the finish line, that could have been top 5, but you will have at least a couple more attempts, so we'll have to see what he can do. Trevor Wenham as well, looks like he is a couple of tenths up as he makes his way towards this very tricky series of corners, and this combined with the other chicane where you really have to chuck it at the curbs is definitely where we're going to be seeing the majority of the track warnings aspect to these guys. And another factor to consider in the race side of things is if you attack those curbs over that big chicane just a bit too much, or even on the exit of turn 4 where we've seen Malinowski running a little bit wide through there, pushing really hard, just trying to get the power down early as possible. If you drop off the side of that too many times, the bumps off the track can actually start leading towards suffering from slow punctures and things as well. So that's something to watch out for. And something else to watch out for is Trevor Wenham as he goes up into provisional P1, the first driver to break into the 26s. Niels almost managed to get into the 26s as well, as he does a 27.000. So very fine margins at the front there, but the first 26 so far with realistically only at most a couple of attempts left for these guys, so very, very tight margins at the front.
That must have been really annoying for Niels. He was, I think, 3 tenths up at the end of his lap, probably excited to take that P1, and then Trevor just sneaked in, yoinked that P1 from him. 1500s between them right now, 15,000, sorry. So incredibly close at the top. I tell you, who isn't quite that close, that Jardier. Currently sitting in P8, 4 tenths behind P1. Can't really get a good lap together right now. And also time is running out, so he will need to make that next lap stick to get into the front positions. Now dropping back to P9, so not looking good for him for the championship right now.
No, absolutely not. We were just looking at Petrochenko there, who's bumped his way up to P6. That's a fantastic time in the Nissan. That's a really, really strong effort from him. Someone else that is on a huge improvement at the moment is Gregor Schill. He's 4 tenths up on his time, so if he can gain just a bit more, which he has, it's 5 tenths. This could potentially, I think he lost a little bit on the exit there. I think this could be looking towards the top 5 as he crosses the line, and it'll be P5 for the time being. So about 2 tenths away from Trevor Wenham at the moment. Who else is on a good lap? We've got Mattis Leto currently sitting in P17, but he's 4 tenths up on his lap. And it's amazing, just if you manage to sort of get that good lap in, this is why it can be so critical with that chicane in the middle of this track. Because you can gain and lose so much there that if you don't quite put that lap together, or you don't extract the maximum from it, it can be a huge difference in Tier 1 because these guys are separated by the tightest of margins. But he's carried a 6/10 improvement all the way to the line, and he goes all the way up to P5. That is a brilliant potentially last minute dash there from him. 27.1 from him, so that is a fantastic lap, as that looks like that will actually be his last lap as he has slowed down. But that was a fantastic effort from Mattis there to make his way up. Trying to keep an eye on who else might be on an improvement. I think Jardier is potentially on a lap, but at least from what the Delta is suggesting on my end, he's not particularly on improvement. So we've got George Boothby currently sitting in P3. He won't be improving. He's in the pits. And Jardier well outside the top 10. And with what we were saying about overtaking, this could seriously impact his chances of winning this championship.
Yeah, not really looking like he's going to improve on this lap, except if he maybe finds time in the last chicane. Doesn't really. a few thousandths of a second. So he's gonna start in P11, 8 places behind George. That's gonna be annoying for him. But then again, we have seen some crazy stuff happening in lap 1 in this season so far. So 90 minutes to go, there's still plenty of time to get those positions back. Just has to find his form during the race, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that he'll be happy about. I'll tell you what, though, I'm interested to see what this time is from Euro. It says he's 3/10 up, so this could be a seriously quick time. And, oh, I think he must have invalidated it. I think, oh, and would you believe it? It would have been a 26.977, so it would have actually taken pole by 8 thousandths of a second, but somewhere along the course of that lap, he invalidated it. So that Nissan's got serious amounts of pace. Has a huge amount of pace in there as the camera takes quite a while to pan over to Malinowski, but he is looking like he's on a good improvement, and I think he went a little bit deep there into the final chicane. He will run into line. He does look like he's still improving potentially. Maybe not. I think he might stay about where he is, and he does improve, but only to P3, so 5 thousandths of the way from Niels Niox. And he slots himself only 2 thousandths ahead of his Yasheet teammate, George Boothby, in the closing stages of that. But in the end then, Trevor Wenham will take pole position, the only driver to get into the 26s. And that was a fantastic effort there from him. And it was a good challenge from the likes of Niels, Malinowski and George Boothby, but they weren't quite able to close that gap down to the McLaren. So what a fantastic qualifying session to get our penultimate race of the season underway.
Just look at those margins for the top 4. Just for the people on the stream watching, there were 2,200 separating the top 4, so incredibly close. I think the closest qualifying we've had so far this season. So that's going to be an absolute race over the first few laps. The 4 guys in front pretty much on the same pace. The exact same pace.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely setting itself up to be an interesting race. And with 90 minutes on the clock, we might not have the dynamic weather aspect that we had the joy, maybe not from the driver's perspective, but from the audience and viewers' perspective, we had the joy of seeing how all that panned out at Spa last week. So it is going to be a completely dry race here, so we have that stability. But with 90 minutes on the clock and no pit window, it does open up the opportunity for extreme strategies. And thinking back to even a 60-minute race, we saw George Boothby doing huge undercut strategies at Brands Hatch, Paul Ricard, and those are some of the daring strategies that have kept him in really strong contention during this championship in getting those good, consistent results in. So, you know, we might see some of that come into play, but then Zolder, I think, you know, a circuit that never really provides much relief for the tyres. There's a lot of knocks that these tyres are going to take physically from all the curbs and all the bumps, but there's a lot of high loading corners, quick changes of direction, traction zones, heavy braking zones, and all those things are going to really amplify the wear over that 90-minute period. So, you know, we might see people that gain a huge amounts during the undercut and then just have nothing to work with potentially with the closing stage of the race. So it opens up a good opportunity for different strategies. And before we start formation lap, we'll have a bit of a run through of the grid. So pole position then for Trevor Wenham, a fantastic effort from him there to put that one together. Closely followed by Niels Narks, getting a good result for him to put that BS Plus competition car on the front row. Maciej Malinowski, first Yasheet driver, sitting in P3, and then P4 our championship leader George Boothby. He'll be pleased from a championship perspective about where his rivals are, but he would have liked to have maybe been just that little bit further up, so he has a bit of a better chance to run away and maybe not get too much involved in the mid-pack. Mattis Leto, a very, very good late effort from him to get his BMW up into P5, followed by Gregor Schill sitting in P6. Darren McCormack seeing the Williams Esports McLaren up there once again, although I say that his team name has actually changed. I wonder if there's a different livery on that car. Can't really see it at the moment, but we'll have to see when we can get a better angle. The ACC camera is not doing a great job at the moment, but Yuri Petchenko representing Team Nissan sitting in P8. Very, very good effort from him once again. Mats Lindholm Anderson in the McLaren that is pretending to be a Porsche McLaren in Porsche clothing anyway. Hugo Merle's wrapping up the top 10 with a good result from last week and building upon that momentum as he gets here at Zolder. Do you want to finish off the grid, Tetra?
Sure, we left at Hugo Merles, right?
Yes.
Alright, so P11, as we start into the formation lap, we have Jadia. Probably going to be disappointed with that qualifying performance. He is currently P2 in the championship, needs to make up some positions to get those points to beat George. Behind him, Max Wojtina in P12 in the Porsche. We have in P13 Steve Favreau. I'm sorry, I can't do French names. Starting next to him, Valentin Barria for the virtual drivers team. In the McLaren, then we have Samir Foch, who is starting in P15. Best finish this season so far from him, P13. So he might have a chance at getting his best race yet. And then P16 we have Vanko Dimitrov in the Aston Martin, one of the few Astons on the grid today, one of three. P17 Ivan Shemetinsky for SMP Racing Esport in the Bentley. P18 Jan Marcel Dietrich for our Sim Racing team, who is also currently P10 in the championship. Had a best finish of P4 so far this season. So yeah, work to do for him to get back to where he maybe feels he belongs. And then towards the business end of the grid, we have Kiran Prendergast in P20. We have Briatte in P21. Darren King in P22. So probably also not where he wants to be. Missed out on last
slightly
races.
Unnoticed actually, didn't it? I didn't, because I think he maybe has been away for a couple of races, but yeah, not where we would be expecting to see Darking. But it's good to see him. Good to see him back on the grid, but yeah, not where he would want to be starting by any means.
They missed out on Spa last week, and also had a DNF at Hungary. I think that was a disconnect or something, if my memory suits me right. But has finished P6 so far this season, so yeah, there's somewhere to go up, not where we would expect him to be in the penultimate position, and behind him Remy Rapin in P23 as we are going towards the start of the race. Grid lining up at the Jackie X Bocht.
It's one of many corners that is almost unpronounceable for this circuit. So we shall be using the corner numbers mainly, but yeah, absolutely right. These guys lining up on the grid when are the lights going to go green, and they are away. It looked like a good start there from Trevor Wenham. You should have that covered in towards turn 1. Niels Knights might actually come under pressure a little bit from Malinowski. No, it looks like he's going to hold on to that for the time being. As Greg and Schill looking, trying to make a move on Mattis Lato. George Boothby holding those guys up a little bit, but looks like everyone's roughly maintained position so far. We've also got Yuri Petchenko going side by side. I think that's with Darren McCormack. And it looks like McCormack's going to go all the way around the outside. Brilliant move from him. Looking a little bit further down the grid. There's a lot of busy cars going on there. Hopefully everyone keeps it clean as now the timing board sorts itself out. A lot of people going side by side through the chicane there, but it looks like everyone has actually managed to get through pretty safely so far. Haven't seen anyone fall off a circuit just yet. Oh, a little bit of bumping as they go through that chicane there. I think that was the likes of, it was one of the McLarens. I think that might have been
I think that was Briette who went a bit wide, saw the cone flying through the air.
already removing some of the markers on the circuit. It's kind of traditional on lap ones of any of these races to really destroy most of the circuit in the first lap, and we see it's so busy at the back end of the grid. We've got Shermatinsky and Darking just trying to find a way through as everyone's still going very side by side. Shermatinsky trying to hold that position on the exit. Darking might take advantage of that, so he looks to go towards the outside of I think that's no, it's not Briatta. I think that's Kieran Prendergast. Can he make that work around turn one? It's really difficult to do that, and no, Prenter will hold on to that position, and now Darking is under pressure from, I think that's Dominic Goltz in one of our only other Astons. We have got someone that's already come into the pits, the number 8 car. That is Briatta that's come in. So, there's this contact there between Dominic Goltz and Darren King. Dominic Goltz, a brilliant bit of car control to hold on to that. Flashing lights, clearly not very happy with how that has played out.
That was actually the number 6 car of Papin going into the pits, and weirdly stopped at the pit entrance, reversed, and is now carrying on with the race.
How odd. So yes, you're right that was Remy Papin. So not quite sure what was going on there, but generally speaking, a fairly clean start there. At the front, it looks like everyone's roughly maintained order. I'll tell you someone had a brilliant start though, is Jardier. He is up into P7 as a yellow flag there for Papin. I've got a feeling that maybe that is going to be a retirement from the race, so we might see him going to the pits sometime soon. Maybe a technical issue or something like that. But yeah, Jardier got himself up from P11 to P7, so and he's got a big clean air in front of him, so he'll be looking to try to push on now and close up to Gregor Schill. But generally speaking, one of the cleaner starts we've seen in Tier 1 so far this season.
Yeah, it was actually no drama in the first lap. It doesn't look like drama in the second lap, so that's actually a really good first lap for AOR.
Yeah, we've definitely had our fair share of chaos at a lot of these races, and considering how technical and sort of tight and twisty this circuit is, there was a lot of side-by-side action going on through these really sort of awkward chicanes, and see Petchenko taking a huge amount of curb there. Actual fact, that's something to note. Petchenko down in P16, so he's someone that has lost out heavily, as we've got Barrier and I think that might have been one of the other Porsches. I can't work out who that was, but going side by side through the chicane, and we've got a lot of cars that are very, very close together here. Samuel Fock also under quite a bit of pressure as well, as I've just realised that the Porsche that Valentine's battling with, that's Malowski. So Malowski at some point as well has dramatically dropped down the order.
I was wondering, he was just working down the order, couldn't see any reason why, just lost 8 positions. So now Jörg's now on P2, Goof be P3, and yeah, disaster for Malinowsko. I'll try to see if I can spot what happened.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to find that out. I think, we've got battle there between Shermatinsky and Dietrich, who went wide, flashing his lights as well. So we do have live stewarding, I believe, in Tier 1, so we'll see if there's any inquiries that come about that change the order a bit. Jan-Marcel Dietrich trying to make up the position already on a rather battered and bruised McLaren of Kieran Prendergast. So they go side by side through turn 4 and go on board with Darking here, as he will be licking his lips and seeing if he can make something work from here. It does look like that McLaren is going to stretch its legs on that back straight. Always a huge moment there for Jan-Marcel Dietrich. He will now likely be under a bit of pressure then from Darking. Can he do something into the braking zone? Not quite. As we've also got Briatta running side by side. Contact there with Samuel Fock. Samuel Fock off. Briatta comes back onto the track. Contact with Petchenko, that is. And Petchenko managing to carry on, but that's the sort of problem that can happen with this circuit. You make a mistake with one car and it's so tight, especially in such a close field. And there's just that domino effect of cars that get caught up in there. So that is very, very disappointing for Samir and a couple of those guys. I think Samir has managed to keep on going. Hugo Merles, another driver that's dropped all the way to the back. And I'm also seeing in the chat that apparently it was the chicane. I'm assuming that's the big sausage curb-like chicane, and that was what took out Malinowski. So
yeah, he went over the exit curb a bit too eager and spun the car around.
yeah, absolutely disastrous for him. So yeah, already seeing a lot of people suffer as Mattis Lato, he skips the chicane. God, these guys are taking so much curb. Trevor Wenham hasn't been able to escape from Niels Narks, and it does look like over these last couple of laps that Niels is looking more comfortable. George Boothby a little bit no man's land for him at the moment, but we might have a battle for the race lead on momentarily. It's been a bit of time since Niels was in a position to really put in a strong challenge for a win here in AOR, and potentially his opportunity has come today as he runs almost right into the back of Trevor Wenham. It's a 90-minute race, remember. Don't want to be making mistakes like that, otherwise that will certainly bring that charge to an end. But small mistakes aside, it does look like, generally speaking, that Niels Narks, as Trevor Wenham runs a bit wide there through turn 1, does look like he's the stronger car on average at the moment, and that might just be about the level of confidence he has over these sorts of sausage curbs in sort of through that turn 5-6 section, because the McLaren, like I say, it's an incredibly low to the ground car. It doesn't have a great deal of suspension travels. That BMW may be able to cope with it just a little bit better. As last lap, George Boothby set the fastest lap of the race, so he's looking to try to close up towards these guys. As I think one of our closest battles at the front is Gregor Schill trying to hunt down Mattis Lato. So definitely all getting very feisty up and down the order at the moment.
Yeah, so at the battle for the front, we can see Neil just way more comfortable on the track, knows where to put his car, doesn't really have those small moments that Trevor shows. Just seems like the BMW is much more comfortable around those curbs. Whereas the McLaren maybe a bit faster over one lap, but a bigger challenge over the race, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a tricky one to be consistent with that car. Just hopping briefly on board with this train behind Kieran Prendergast. I think he's got quite a bit of damage. He's got a train of 6 cars all behind him, trying to break the toe on the back straight. Shouldn't have to worry too much. Porsche doesn't have the greatest straight line speed. I think Darking flashing the lights there a bit. I don't think for any wrongdoing, but just trying to sort of maybe say he has the pace, so let me have a go at this guy, and you might be able to follow through, as he is now locked onto the gearbox of Jan-Marcel Dietrich. Can he do anything as they head through turn 1? Does look like Darkin's got some good pace. We're going to try to go around the outside. That would be a brave move. Not going to be able to do anything just yet for the time being. Can he set up a move somewhere else? As we've also got Hugo Merles hunting Dominic Goltz in the background. So this train definitely away from the bulk of the group, kind of in the middle of our grid at the moment. But the battle's still very much raging on. Doesn't look like Darkin can do anything for the time being. But we're just seeing how difficult it is to overtake around here. As Zolder, you can get fairly close, but it's just so treacherous to try to go for an overtake in some of these tricky locations. It just seems that as soon as you close up onto the back of someone, unless you have a really clear view of the upcoming overtaking zone, trying to follow around here is so tricky with how treacherous certain parts of tracks can be.
And we just saw Dietrich making a small mistake and lost the lead to Darking, and now under threat from 1, 2, 4, 5 cars behind him. So not only is it difficult to overtake, but also defending just proving really tricky, because you just have to be perfect lap after lap.
Going off there, contact there with Dominic Goltz.
Goltz and Merles. Merles just went straight on.
Yeah, Merles rejoining as well, so disastrous race for Merles so far. We were saying he was going to try to maybe build upon that momentum, but yeah, I think Darking sort of dropped down the order a little bit there, and it all just got bunched up again. And yeah, unfortunately, some of the contact that can happen is so easily done, and unfortunately, there Goltz, I think, a victim once more potentially, as he'll be pretty pretty disappointed so far with how this race has been panning out for him. Just hopping on board slightly further up the grid. We've also got Mats Lindholm Andersen, who's got Malinowski hunting him down and putting him under a lot of pressure. Malinowski has done well to stay within the top 10 despite that moment and maintain a good amount of pace in that car. He might be one that we see go for an undercut of some sorts, because we know that he's going to have better pace than these guys, and there's a huge gap to some of the guys at the proper pointy end of the grid. Hop on board here with Malinowski for a moment and just see what is it like from his point of view as he tries to make a move on our imposter McLaren Porsche. And yeah, the Porsche as well, it's sometimes just a really tricky car to overtake with, because it's good in acceleration zones, it's good under braking, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that you can set up the moves. And if the track doesn't lend itself really to setting up these overtakes, you can be stuck behind people for a really long time.
And just as an update, we just had Dimitrov retiring from the race. Just had a yellow flag showed for him, just randomly stuck on the fence, so it looked like some sort of connection trouble.
That's incredibly disappointing for him. He was having a fairly good race as well, so that is a big shame. Does look like Malinowski he has pace in the car. He's a lot more confident, despite being killed by that chicane earlier. He's a lot more confident in taking the curbs than those McLarens are, but just doesn't seem to be able to find an opportunity to really make some sort of form of move. So he does seem a little bit bottlenecked for now. Also, just as a little bit of a shout out for Steve in the 115 car. I won't attempt to pronounce the surname because I will inevitably butcher it. But he is doing very well. Oh, we just skipped ahead and there's contact between Gregor Schill and Mattis Lato. Mattis managed to hold onto the car. He's going to still give Gregor a run for his money as they head down towards turn 1. I think that was just a misjudgment there from Gregor on the apex of the chicane. Matt is trying to hold that inside line. There's no love lost there between those two. There's contact there between Jardier and Gregor. Gregor then cutting across the nose of Max Vottnayer as well. So it's all getting very, very busy amongst those guys. Jardier, that could have been absolutely catastrophic for his championship as he now looks to put some pressure onto Mattis Lato, trying to go down the inside of turn 4. Can he make that move work? Mattis didn't quite leave him enough room on the apex. I don't think he closed up steering a little bit early. As then Gregor's now trying to get a run onto Jardier. This is going to be dangerous heading towards that chicane. How aggressive is Jardier? Leaves him a tiny bit of room as Gregor actually skips the chicane there, and Jardier manages to get his way up into P4, which is huge for the championship. And now Max Vottnayer going side by side with Mattis Lato as well. Mattis dropping positions like flies as they're trying to squeeze their way through that chicane. Steve Favre trying to make his way past us. Then Malinowski's forcing his way through. It's absolute chaos. As soon as an opportunity opens up amongst these guys, everyone's almost like a group of hyenas just trying to find some sort of opportunity somewhere. As Mats Lindholm Andersen, he's now under pressure from Barry, but that's slightly almost a slightly pointless battle because Barry has unfortunately got a penalty, drive-through penalty, which he will serve immediately to get his way out the traffic. But my goodness, what a huge amount of chaos there that just broke out in such a short space of time. But the driver that benefited the absolute most from that was Jardier, who finds himself now only one position down on his championship rival. So that has worked out brilliantly for him.
Yeah, just all kicked off with Chill and Lato. During that battle, I don't think they really left a lot of space when they rejoined the track and punted Jardier out of the way. Jardier then went through the chicane on 2 wheels actually. Managed to stick onto the position, and I think he will be very happy to be out of that battle now. Clean air in front of him, 11 seconds to P3 to George.
Oh, sorry to cut you off there. With Max Vottnayer misjudging his braking zone, and poor Mattis Lateo again being bumped. Fortunately, they're both just straight line the chicane, so no damage done. As there's, I think that's Shermatinsky trying to force his way down the inside of Mats Lindholm Andersen, and isn't going to be able to make that one stick. And oh, it's a huge moment there for Lateo as he comes out of the exit of turn 8, I think that was, and Vottnayer is going to head down towards the inside. The ATC camera is not helping us out whatsoever. it's going to take 14 years to pan across, but it looks like Whatnot might have got this move done as Malinowski's having to fend there from Steve Falver. Oh, there's a bump there. Malinowski hit Matis Lateo, and Malinowski's off. Malinowski has completely spun off there. Lateo, again, the innocent victim, falling off the track.
Spins again, trying to rejoin.
Absolutely catastrophic stuff there. Oh, that's an awkward rejoin there from him. But these guys maybe just getting a little bit frustrated. Remember, guys, it is a 90-minute race. As now Mats Lindholm Anderson trying to go around the outside of Lateo. That BMW is going to have a huge amount of damage just over the course of a few laps as Lateo goes off and he's going to lose 4 positions in one corner. We've got Steve Falver trying to overtake the Bentley. Apologies to the 115 every time I say his name. I seem to give it another pronunciation. But it does look like those guys may have settled for just a brief moment. But yeah, absolutely catastrophic there for Malinowski. And poor Matis Lateo has just been battered and bruised constantly over these last few laps. And I haven't really seen a single incident there that was his fault. So that is a very disappointing couple of laps for him. In the meantime, Gregor Schiller's managed to close up towards Jardier. Jardier doesn't look like he's got the greatest amount of pace in that car. He's managed to sneak his way up the order, but really hasn't been able to stretch his legs at all. So he might come under pressure soon. But Gregor was involved in quite a few incidents there during those last few laps, so there's the potential that he might suffer from some sort of penalty, which would help Jardier out, as dropping back Jan Marcel Dietrich and Malinowski going side by side into the final chicane. Oh, as Malinowski bails out completely and heads towards the pits. I'm not sure if that was intentional or if that was forced, but he has dived into the pits. So has Matis Lateo, I think, by the looks of that, if that is the car ahead of him. It is. So we've got a few people pitting, and this is an aggressive undercut. This is a very aggressive undercut. Only less than 20 minutes into the race, and these guys already looking to repair damage and change their tyres. So that could be very interesting in the latter stages. But my goodness, we had some sense of calm for a few laps, and it's just all kicked off over the last few laps.
Yeah, I think we're just praising these guys a bit too early when we're talking about the clean first 2 laps and when it all kicked off in the midfield. Of course, with a track this narrow, very small margins, people get frustrated, they want to get past, and yeah, if you have 6 cars bunched up, there's not a lot of room for them to go if they have to bail out on an overtake, if they take an exit the wrong way, and we saw it all kick off. And yeah, some drivers on the receiving end from no fault of their own, but also some drivers, benefiting from it. Like, as we mentioned, Jardier now in P4 managed to create a bit of a gap to Gregor, but also losing time to George in front, around 1 second a lap at the moment, half a second. Maybe we can get a few minutes to take a breather in the midfield. No very close battles right now, as it looks. A bit far back we have Dominic Gölz trying to get past Dietrich for P15, but that's currently about it. And of course, Gregor Schill still attacking Jardier for P4.
Yeah, so battles up and down the order, and it was such a shame we had a clean start for quite a while during that kind of first 15 minutes, and then it just, everyone getting a bit frustrated and not being able to make up any sort of time. Matis Lateo we saw coming out of the pits. Malinowski still in the pits, so is the likes of Valentine Barrier. Assuming, Valentine is still in this race, but is still doing his pit stop, so repairing a lot of damage on those cars. Lateo, you would have to expect, he's currently amongst sort of between Votnar and Mats Lindholm Anderson. He's been shown the blue flag, but we know that he's got strong pace. Oh, but he will eventually concede and let those guys pass. So being extremely fair, I thought that he might just try to give it a go, because if he could maintain that same pace, those other guys, that when they do their pit stop, he wouldn't have lost so much time. But I think he's just going to slot in behind this group of cars for the time being and try to see where his race ends up taking him. But very, very disappointing series of laps for him. We haven't looked at the front for a long time because there's been so much action elsewhere, but Trevor Wenham, Nils Niox and George Boothby have, well, have absolutely been the class of the field so far. They've just been putting in clean, consistent laps, not really battling too much, especially as time has gone on. Those gaps have stabilised a bit. George Boothby closed down a bit initially, but has lost a little bit of touch with Nils and Trevor Wenham. But these guys are just, they are just almost kind of about 3/4 of a sector ahead of the rest of the field, and then there's a decent gap between Jardier and the battle with Jardier and Gregor Schill, and then before you go down to the likes of Otnai. So you can see just how much that battling has hurt some of these other guys. But looking at the times on the last lap again, Nils a 10th faster than Trevor Wenham. Are the tyres on the McLaren starting to die off, or is Trevor having to back off potentially a little bit? We don't know what some of these guys' situation is with track warnings, maybe even slow punctures as well. So it does look like that Nils, despite not being able to do too much for the vast majority of this race so far, does seem to be closing up a little bit at a time. Just checking in on some other battles as well. Mats Lindholm-Andersen does look like he might come under a bit of pressure from Shermatinsky, who, it has to be said, has had a good race so far. He's generally, I think, he's been very much amongst the sort of the chaos, but he's generally, I think, kept his nose clean. Although this will be interesting side by side towards that chicane. That's going to be really tricky. Door to door, getting a little bit bumpy there. Oh, Shermatinsky almost doing a ski jump over that second sausage curb. And as Steve Falver has got a drive-through penalty, so that's very disappointing for him. Shermatinsky, it looks like he is going to take that position away from Lindholm-Andersen. There might be a little bit of debate as to whether or not he's made that move, or well, effectively gained advantage by skipping the chicane there. He'll argue that he was forced wide, and Lindholm-Andersen will argue that he was he's made up an advantage as McCormack goes very, very deep there, and he now might be under pressure from Steve Falver. Although, again, it's a little bit of a pointless battle from Steve's point of view. He is going to have to serve a drive-through. Derry will know that. Does Steve choose to serve it here? He does. So Steve Falver goes to serve his drive-through. But, yeah, very, very close there. Oh, I just realised.
At the front we have Niels getting past Wenham. So Niels now is on P1. Wenham now also on the front from Boothby. So Wenham just pretty much dropped off his last lap. Doesn't really get the pace together anymore. Lost the position to Naujoks and under threat from Boothby. So, yeah.
It was a 29.7 from him last lap.
Also, no big mistake that I saw. I don't think he made any error or something. I think he's just falling off the pace for some reason.
Yeah, very curious one. What a shame that we missed that. We had chaos going on further down. I did try going 30 seconds back on the replay, which is the maximum that I can go back, unfortunately. But unable to see what happened there. But I'm assuming then, if it wasn't a catastrophic mistake, maybe it was just skipping a chicane. Maybe went a bit wide at a certain corner time, but you know, these guys were very close together. But after being able to maintain that advantage for so long, he'll be very disappointed to drop to P2. But not all is said and done just yet. We might see on the back of this change in order, we might see Trevor come in to do an early pit stop and maybe try to undercut his way back in front of Nils. But yeah, you can see he just doesn't seem to have a great deal of pace. Last lap, as soon as Nils was released into free air, a 27.777, so definitely all the sevens on that lap, but he was only 0.2 off his personal best, whereas Trevor and George, they were in the low 28s, and you know, you got the likes of Nils' teammate, who's the only other driver in the top 5 to still be lapping in the 27s, so no, either this is degradation, this could be slow punctures, this could be caution with the chicane. Not entirely sure what the reasons are, but Nils is just running away now as soon as he's been released, and yeah, Trevor nor George really able to do anything about it.
Yeah, we saw Nils at the first stage of this race just trailing Trevor a bit, not really trying any big moves or anything. I think it was just biding his time, keeping the car on track, not really trying any big moves, and now it paid off. It's P1, you can see the pace just much better from him. He's already pulling a gap, already over a second in front, and yeah, just benefiting from having a calm approach, just yeah, focusing on the track. Maybe in contrast to what we've seen in the midfield so far today.
Yeah, it was a much more reserved and conservative approach from Nils, but this is what we would expect from him. He's been in the sports game for quite a while. You know, there's a few drivers that sort of more on the young side or just more are early into their kind of top tier competition level of racing on ACC or just top tier level esports in general. Whereas Nils, he's a lot more experienced than the majority of drivers on the grid. You'd say that arguably the sort of the likes of Jardier, he's obviously been involved in sim racing for a long time as well. So those guys, they tend to be a bit more patient. They deal fairly well in situations of navigating their way through the chaos. They're 9 times out of 10 they're the more consistent drivers during a stint, and you know that just seems to be what we're seeing here today. On that last lap, though, it should be noted, we were saying that Nils was running away very quickly. Trevor did do a very high 27, just about squeezing into 27s there, so he's still sticking around that sort of pace margin, which we generally expect. As Gregor then flashes his lights, I think, in nothing else but an attempt at a distraction tactic, but I think Jardier will be all too wise and experienced to sense any sort of additional pressure from that. But yeah, it does look like, as far as those guys at the front, again, it was very close between them on that last series of laps, so I don't think it's entirely all said and done just yet. But yeah, Nils keeping a calm, cool and collected head on his shoulders and putting together a good race so far. Gregor, his teammate, hasn't been able to do anything about Jardier just yet. Has lost a couple of tenths on that last lap, as well as just checking to see if there's any other battles. I think there was some pit board shuffling there with some pit stops.
Just as a side note, we have Malinowski. He was just in the pits, now has retired, so he's out of the race. Very, very unfortunate. One of the top 4 runners in qualifying. Definitely had the pace to fight for the win today. And yeah, just a small series of unfortunate incidents now leading to a retirement. Very, very unlucky and very sad to see one of the very fast drivers today be out of the race so early.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll tell you one thing it does bring into question as well, which is something we haven't talked about too much, which is the team championship. So at the as it stands, Yassi very, very dominant with drivers in 1, 2 and 3 at the moment, but there's a very close gap between Nils and Malinowski, and Malinowski retiring, Nils potentially winning this race. Don't want to jinx him too early on, but that's going to be quite an overturn of points potentially. We've got Gregor in P5, Jardier and George are sitting in 3rd and 4th, so it should, I think, head slightly in the direction of BS Plus competition. And whilst I don't think it's going to make too much of an inroad to taking the fight to Yassi in the team championship, it does just mean that the chance of being able to potentially overturn it at the final race just ends up maybe being a little bit more feasible for the time being. But yeah, a big shame there with Malinowski retiring. Looking at the chat for a moment as well, I've got people asking about slow punctures, and yes, it is definitely a thing in this game. So if you there's a variety of ways that you can get it. With what we would likely expect from around here, you can get slow punctures by just clattering curves, either whether it's the sort of the sausage curves at the chicane or running wide going into the gravel, and sometimes if the gravel trap is then followed by quite a severe bump back onto the circuit or the grass, something like that. The Donington's a good example. You can definitely get slow punctures from those sorts of impacts. You can also get them from having tyres that are either too under pressure, and they become a lot more sensitive. And equally, you can also get not necessarily I think the punctures from overheating issues, which can also happen, tends to be a little bit more spontaneous and intense. If there's not too much of a sense of warning on that front, they tend to sort of balloon and then just spontaneously give out. But sometimes you can get a small amount of warning from those. But yeah, slow punctures and punctures in general, definitely a very real aspect of this game, and something that these guys around a circuit like this really do have to take into account. As just looking back towards the front again, yeah, the gaps haven't actually changed that much. Of these guys, the margins are so close. The top three covered by 0.03 of a second on that last lap, so you can just see how tight it is at the pointy end of this grid, and these guys really are just in a league of their own at the moment. So I think it's still very much all to play for, because we're not even halfway through this race. We've just broken the half an hour mark, and yeah, with these guys still within sort of just a couple of seconds of each other, and the sort of undercut strategies we could see come into play, maybe not too far away from now. This order by no means is settled. I think we could see a very interesting fight towards the end for the win of this race.
Winham pretty much picked up the pace again. Was probably back a bit a few laps ago, but now keeps the gap pretty much consistently at 1 second to Neujoks. Just like George behind, half a second. Now he's probably back just that slight bit, but yeah, again, as you mentioned earlier, they don't really try any big moves. They don't really go for the overtake. They just do their laps consistently, and try to manage their race for now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And same is true for Jardier and Gregor behind, P4 and P5. Pretty much 5 tenths separating them for, I think it's been 4 laps now. Same gap the whole time, as we see Gregor going over the curb a bit aggressively. Lost some time there. And a bit further back we have a penalty for Liam Anderson.
Yeah, first penalty to come through, and I'm assuming that's a steward penalty, because it's plus 15 seconds, which is not a typical penalty that you would look to get from the game. You either get drive-throughs for corner cutting, or you get a stop-and-go 30-second penalty for speeding in the pits, and he definitely hasn't made his pit stop yet, so we might start to see some of these steward penalties come in, and I believe those can get served in the pits.
We just had the first round of penalties going out, so the penalty for Liam Anderson, that's for collision on lap 2 with car number 14, so that should be McCormack. And we also have a few more penalties coming any second now.
Gregor gets one. That will help Jardier.
20 seconds for car number 8. That was Malinowski. He's already out of the race, so no penalty there. And 10 seconds for car number 13. That's Merles. 5 seconds for Gregor. Let me just have a look. That's for collision in lap 5 with car 27. So that's later. So that was during the midfield kerfuffle we had a few laps ago.
Falva's got one as well. He's got himself a 15-second penalty. We know what that's for?
Let me just have a look. That was for lap 11.
Those were a bit further on. So Stewart's definitely been busy. They've been trying to catch up for quite a while by the looks of them, but a bit of a flurry at this point. So, yeah, Falva was involved in quite. Oh, he's gone off the track there, and I'm guessing that's going to be a retirement from him, which is a shame. Yeah, that's retiring to the pits. So, obviously, he does not agree with the steward's decision there. Can't entirely remember the incident that he was caught up in with all of that. We've had so many absolutely chaotic battles. It's difficult at times to keep track of who ended up hitting who where. But yeah, just looking towards that battle between Gregor and Jardier. Gregor has fallen off quite considerably over these last few laps, and with that 5-second penalty as well, that gives Jardier just a little bit of a buffer to breathe a sigh of relief. As looking towards the front, I think Trevor Wenham may have made a small mistake through the chicane, because George Boothby does seem to have closed up quite considerably on this lap. It's the closest he's been in a while. It's allowed Niels to pull away a bit. As speaking of Niels, Arthur Camera, who unfortunately not in the race this evening, but cheering on his BS Plus competition teammates, and he'll be delighted to see Niels heading the grid at the moment. And Gregor putting on a strong showing as well for the time being. He'll be slightly disappointed with that small penalty that he's got. That could stop him from having an ultimate chance of snatching P4 away from Jardier. But yeah, so far a good, strong showing from the BS Plus competition guys. But it doesn't look like Trevor Wenham's been able to break away from George Boothby just a little bit. I say just a little bit. We're talking very, very small margins like we have done all race. But one thing I would be very interested in kind of noting is that looking at these lap times, for the likes of Niels, who's still doing 27.8 on that last lap, he's been incredibly consistent. Shematinsky as well, he's a bit further down the order and not quite the fastest on track, but the Bentley we said was good around here, and he is the second fastest car on the circuit with a 28.0. So there actually hasn't been too much of this. He takes a huge amount of curve there through a chicane. The Bentley really does love to really launch and jump over those curves. It's where it makes up such a huge amount of time on this circuit. Absolutely skyrockets his way through there. But Shematinsky has got some decent pace in that car, and the drop-off in pace that we're seeing isn't actually that severe. So the undercut strategy, would be interesting to see how much of a pace difference it actually has and how much of an effect it makes, because I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as strong as the likes of what we've seen at some of the other circuits of Paul Ricard, Brands Hatch. Those circuits, it was incredibly powerful, but by the looks of it, the pace throughout this race seems fairly consistent. As one of our first pitters for a sort of proper representative pit stop is Gregor Shields, so he will serve that 5-second penalty in the pits, and he'll be hoping that he doesn't come out amongst any traffic, as he'll be looking to try to make some good use of the undercut, whatever undercut performance there is anyway, to see if any can probably just reel in the time over Jardier, not necessarily make a move. But we're getting definitely to the interesting stage of the race where strategy is going to start playing into it.
Gregor, I think, very early pit stop, but he is going to come out on pretty much clear track, so that's definitely going to be a benefit to him. He's been battling with Jardier for a long time, so maybe he feels like he has a lot more pace in the car if he doesn't have a Porsche blocking the road in front of him. But yeah, so far the only one to pit. I don't think anyone else diving into the pits right now. Front runners definitely going for another lap. So interesting to see when everyone will pit with the halfway mark just around the corner.
Yeah, I think Lateo is one of the only other drivers that's pitted. Obviously, he has suffered immensely during this race and is considerably down the order. I don't think he was able to unlap himself, but huge amount of kudos to him though, it has to be said, for charging on. But maybe amongst some of the other battles that has gone on, he might be able to work his way up just a little bit. As another pitter, we've got Darren McCormack, who has come into the pits as well. So we'll have to see how that plays out for him. I think he's got a bit of damage on that car, so he might have a slightly longer pit stop than he would have ideally liked. Our closest battle on the circuit, though, for the time being, that's been going on for quite a while, is this sort of bit of a duel, bit of a trio. Hugo Melez closes up every now and again, but Dominic Gultz and Samuel Fock have been pretty much nose to tail now for about 15 or so minutes. It's been quite an eventful race for the pair of them. Samir again has been caught up amongst incidents really through no fault of his own, if I remember correctly. I think said earlier that his previous best finishing position was P13, so he's got the potential actually to still get a PB result out of this, which would be a good thing for him to salvage from this race. But it doesn't look like Dominic Goltz is able to do too much about it for the time being. Battle for second place is still pretty close between these guys. You'd have to expect that one of them is going to blink soon when it comes to the pit stops, and usually it's been George that is the one to go for these earlier sort of pit stops and really trying to maximise that strategy. You can see the difference though for the grid. We've got Niels, who's actually lapped Gregor, I believe. So Gregor's done his pit stop, but you can see that's how big a difference there is on track time. That's just the difference between first and Gregor, who was in P5. So that's definitely a great representation to show kind of how much further ahead some of these other guys are. He's actually lapped, at least for the time being, 5th place. But yeah, George Boothby, will he look to play one of his almost expected undercut strategies that we've got so used to seeing from him this season? If it's going to happen, you'd have to expect it will happen soon.
You would think that he is losing time behind.
Trevor comes in.
Goes into the pit actually. So
that's one way to
of
play
what we
out.
expected.
Yeah, that wasn't quite the way around that I expected those McLarens to go. But as Mattis Leteo's day gets even worse, he's got himself a drive-through penalty. It would be a very courageous effort from him if he serves that and continues on. But I would not be surprised if maybe that is a he actually doesn't serve it quite yet, but that could be another retirement coming in soon. But Trevor Wenham, yeah, that's an interesting time for him to pit. Maybe just getting worried about being put under too much pressure from George, making some more mistakes, maybe the tyres are starting to give up a bit more than he would like. And this will be our first, I think, between Gregor and Trevor, this will be a good representation of the sort of pace that we can expect from these guys on this kind of undercut type strategy, because you know the pace drop off at the front. No one's really losing much time at all. Shematinsky is still looking very quick. He's done a 27.9 on the last lap and is hunting down Max Botnice. That Bentley really coming alive in the later stages of this race. It'd be interesting to see if he can carry that momentum into the second half, because with Giardione, he is a reasonable margin up the road, but maybe not an incomprehensible distance for him to cover. But Shematinsky could be looking at a pretty handy result from quite low on the low from where he started on the grid. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on, as Botnar doesn't want to get too involved with that Bentley, and he decides to dive into the pits, as so does George Boothby. So this is going to be an interesting crunch point now for where these guys emerge.
Yeah, just looking at the times to see maybe where the undercut is at the moment. Gregor, last lap he did a 128.1. Of course, he's trying to hunt down Jardia, who on his last lap did a 128.5. Currently looking around his lap time on the old tires. So Gregor definitely faster right now. Question is, will it be fast enough to make the undercut work? And question is also, will Jardia realize that he's under threat of losing P4 and also dive into the pits very soon?
Yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting stage. Trevor Wenham is just coming through turn 1 now. Where is George Boothby? He's about to come out of the pit exit. It's going to be close as they head towards turn 2, but Trevor has just about maintained position. That was definitely very, very close there from him. And yeah, fundamentally, neither of them really gained or lost any time on each other. So it certainly seems that the initial undercut difference is quite small, but maybe for these guys that are looking to stretch out the stint a bit longer, the likes of Niels as Shermatinsky has also come in as well, so he'll be looking to try to get ahead of Votnar. But yeah, the undercut really not very powerful at all. So some of these guys I think might look to stretch out their stint quite a bit. And another driver that I do just want to briefly highlight is Darren King, who has had generally a quiet race. I think he's just trying to keep his nose clean in the middle, as Samir Fock has got a stop and go 30-second penalty, and I think that will be him potentially retiring from the race. We've got Lateo serving his drive-through. Does look like he's actually going to complete it, so kudos to him. But Samir speeding into the pits there, so very disappointing day for him so far, going from bad to worse. But yeah, Darking has generally had quite a clean race, and considering that he started in 22nd, it'd be interesting to see what he can do now in the second phase of this race. He's got clean air for now, is quite away from McCormack, so he's got a big margin there to make up if he wants to hunt down the McLaren. But we've already seen that a great deal of action can happen very quickly in this race, so it's definitely not out of the realms of possibility.
Also, just to mention, as Jadia comes out of the pits, the undercut didn't work for Gregor at all. So,
sorry to cut you off there. Shermatinsky and I think there's Botnar going side by side through turn 4 there. Gregor is just up the road from these guys, but you can see, yeah, that 5-second penalty on Gregor has dropped him quite considerably, but Shermatinsky trying to go around the outside again as there's contact between those two. That's twice now that Shermatinsky has... Oh, Gregor's got a drive-through! Gregor's got a drive-through through that chicane, so that's catastrophic for his race and bringing home a big group of points for BS Plus competition. But Shermatinsky all scratched up on the side of that Bentley, and there might be words there again. It's not the first time that he's potentially gained an advantage by skipping that second part of chicane. It is very difficult to go side by side through. That's why it was so astonishing that people did so well with it during the early stages of the race. But yeah, that was a close fight between those two. And just looking towards the front for a moment, Niels Narks has, if anything, has extended his margin to the guys behind. And you know, with fresher tyres, only by a few minutes, but he has quite a nice comfortable gap. He looks like he was realistically the car to beat in consistent pace during the stint in the first phase of this race. So he's looking very much like he is in a good, strong position for the time being. But yeah, Gregor Schill, that definitely relieves that mistake of getting the drive-through. Definitely relieves Jardier with the pressure that he was having to sustain for the time being. So still twists and turns going on in this race.
Yeah, Jardier pretty much in no man's land now. 70 seconds to George up front, and 10 seconds to Shermatinsky behind after Gregor goes in for his drive-through. And yeah, as we mentioned, Nils Naujoks extended his lead by about 1.5 seconds. Also now retakes the de facto lead of the race as Prendergast goes into the pits after he collected 1 or 2 lead laps just for the statistics, because it's nice to have those in there. And yeah, things a bit settled again on the grid. We have a few battles going on. For instance, Darking trying to get P10, or rather P9 from Petrichenko, sorry. And behind him, Wyndham Anderson also trying to attack Girls, but still half a second between them. So nothing.
Botnar's got a penalty as well. If you'd have a look and see what that might be for, because he's got a 5-second penalty, which I think after having received that immediately after that series of contact and sort of bumping with Shermatinsky, I'm sure it was nothing to do with that incident. I'm very confident that's from earlier on in the race. But
that's a penalty for contact with Lito in lap 11. So that's I think the 4th penalty that somebody got because they punted Lito off the track. So it just goes to show how unlucky of a race he had also in the pits right now. I
it was a very
think he
disappointing
might
race for him.
be retiring, and I don't think anyone can blame him.
No, not at all. It's been an awful race for him, and he fundamentally is, at least every time that I saw an incident that he was involved in, I not once did I see that it was actually something that he could be blamed for. And after such a strong qualifying performance, I am rather gutted for him, because he just could not seem to escape it. He really did seem to have a target on his back when it came to any sort of form of battle, and people would outbreak themselves. They would make a misjudgment as the concertina effect in the apexes, and he just got bumped around, pushed off the circuit, battered and bruised, then got a drive-through penalty. It really has not been a good or kind day to Lateo. So yeah, very disappointing day for him. Looks like we unfortunately missed Dominic Gultz. I believe got past Mats Lindemann. Lindemann has not said goodbye to that just yet, although one thing I do want to keep an eye on is, where does Gregor Schill come out? He stayed out as long as he could to not serve that penalty, and he will come out behind those two guys of Gultz and Lindemann, so he's still within touching distance of being able to close up a bit, but that penalty has obviously hurt him very severely, as just hopping on board with Dalking, flashing the lights at Petchenko, trying to put him off and see if he can make a move. But that Nissan's still showing a good amount of pace and performance at the moment. And yeah, a driver that again I definitely want to highlight is Shermatinsky. Has done extraordinarily well to kind of make his way up through all of these battles. There's obviously a little bit of question over maybe a couple of those moves, so it could still potentially change, but he's still holding in P5, which, considering his initial grid position, is a very solid effort from him. In the meantime, McCormack has set the fastest lap of the race, so that's interesting side of things for him to deal with. But yeah, definitely a long amount of this race to go, and by no means are any of these battles over.
I also quickly want to mention Kieran Prendergast. I don't think we have talked about him at all so far, except for when he pitted from P1, but he's currently in P8 after his pit stop. Very quiet race, but getting the result.
Yes, that's a very strong showing there from Kieran, actually, it has to be said. And with Dalking and Petchenko battling pretty hard behind him, and I think Petchenko is being a little bit of... Oh, as he's gone off over the chicane, he makes a mistake. He does manage to keep it out of the wall, but does eventually fall victim, another victim of the sausage curbs at that chicane, and now that releases Dalking. I was just going to say that Kieran Prendergast would have been pleased about those two battling, as that would have kept Dalking behind that bit longer, but now you would have to potentially think, with the sort of pace that we've seen Dalking demonstrate at other points in the calendar, that he would be absolutely, with 35 minutes left to go, very much within a chance of catching up to the likes of Kieran there, and potentially taking that position away from him. But yeah, without a doubt, Kieran has been fairly quiet in this race. I think he started, similar to Shermatinsky, very, very low down in the order, and I think looking at the front of that car, it has been a little bit battered and bruised so far this race, so maybe didn't repair the damage during the pits. That's a potential way that you can save some track time, but it does look like his pace is fairly strong, at least. It's definitely not the fastest, but it's pretty decent. But yeah, currently sitting in P8, a very, very good result from him so far in this race, and it'd be interesting to see if he can hold on to that, or how long he can hold on to that as we go further into the course of this race.
Also, just jumping back to the front, maybe, we talked about how Niels extended his gap to 3 seconds, and Trevor just, caught up by a lot. He was, I think, 6/10 behind Niels last lap, made a small error, now 1.5 seconds, but definitely got the pace to challenge for the lead again over the course of the race. But of course, George behind him now half a second after the mistake by Trevor. Also, still definitely in a fight for the lead. We also just saw Trevor weaving a lot on the straight.
Yeah, we caught that on the stream. It was very strange.
He's just trying to get a bit more feeling into his hands again after an hour on the wheel. Or maybe he's just bored.
Potentially, I think maybe. Oh, I
think he has a few connection issues.
I
right?
think yes. Now I was getting a few dropped frames when I was looking at the onboard from Trevor earlier, and then through that was turn 8, I believe, had a very wonky looking car through that line, and we've got George Boothby. I think he's I think a combination maybe between flashing Trevor, trying to put him off so that he can gain a position, but maybe also trying to raise a bit of awareness there of the lag that Trevor is experiencing, and maybe that slightly curious, almost Macarena-inspired dance he was doing down the start-finish straight in that McLaren was in some form or another either exercising frustration of maybe what that lag is like on his end. It can be very unpleasant to drive with at times. Or alternatively, that could have been some sort of form of test for what the behaviour in that car was. But very curious as then we see a similar wiggle behind Trevor's car from George. So I don't know what it is about the McLarens at the moment. Everyone's getting very shaky on this Zolder circuit for the time being, but it does look like for the time being his connection has settled down.
And while those two are battling their internet connection, just look at the lap time by Niels, just at a 1:27.39.
That's extraordinarily quick, and it's as Mats Lindholm Andersen has got past Dominic Goltz there. I think Goltz went slightly wide. I was just checking sort of what the pace difference was in Niels' lap there, but I think Goltz went slightly wide into turn 1. That allowed Lindholm Andersen to get down the inside, and now Goltz is under all sorts of pressure from Gregor Schill. Gregor running a little bit wide there through the exit of turn 4. And also just to make matters worse, Dominic Goltz a 25-second penalty. Votnai has had an extra 5 seconds added to his time as well, so we still definitely got penalties rolling in. Goltz going a little bit defensive. Gregor will be getting frustrated if he gets held up for too long behind these guys, but yeah, in terms of Niels' pace, that is extraordinarily fast from him, and with the mistakes or the curious dancing that we're seeing from the McLarens in second and third at the moment, that the pace difference between Niels and second and third is absolutely massive. So he's potentially putting himself in a very strong position to kind of run away with this a little bit in the final half an hour. But yeah, maintaining that concentration, especially as we kind of lose a bit more of the light, we're gradually descending into a bit of darkness. It can be so difficult to stay kind of close to the limit, but just not going over it and having a huge detrimental mistake as some sort of consequence of just a slight lack of concentration, as Gregor even just demonstrating that a little bit, as again he runs slightly wide whilst trying to push on behind Goltz. So a lot of battles that are very much unresolved for the time being, and stewards' inquiries may have something to say about these positions as well.
Interestingly enough, that penalty for Goltz, that's a penalty for a collision in the pit lane with car 22. So that's a car of Steve Fauver that resulted in a drive-through penalty for car 22. So we saw the drive-through that made Steve retire from the race. So that was apparently caused by Goltz. So that might explain the very harsh penalty. 25 seconds, pretty much the highest penalty that the organizers hand out, apart from a disqualification.
Yes, I don't believe we've ever had a disqualification, thankfully, in AOL before. We have seen some harsh penalties, but nothing quite to that extent. I wondered if for a moment if that was for Samir Fock, because he did get a stop, because he got a stop and go 30-second penalty. And that is what you would conventionally get for speeding in the pit lane. I didn't see that penalty appear for Steve Fowler, so I'm not sure. And also some of the numbers end up jumbling a little bit on the leaderboard, so I'm not 100% certain. Sort of, or if maybe Sam Mears was just completely done sort of by his own accord. We'll have to see if someone else gets a penalty for causing someone else to have a similar incident with the pit lane. But yeah, slightly unusual incident. But I think the entry to the pit lane here is just it's quite deceiving. How sharp the entry is. You carry so much speed and you brake so much later for it, and it does give rise to an opportunity to have those sorts of incidents as you then make your way through that section. And speaking of opportunities, Gregor might think of having a look down the inside. He's been trying to size up this move for a long time as he goes down the inside of turn 7, and he makes that stick beautifully. That was a fantastic, I think, the first move that we've seen into that sequence of corners that was clean and absolutely brilliantly executed, and that will now release him to charge off after Mats Lindemann as Dominic Goltz gets very close to the back of him there. Don't want to be getting any more penalties there, Dominic, for this race, but Gregor being released now, and he will charge on to the likes of also Petrochenko, who has been falling down the order. Did a 29.1 on that last lap. Lindemann has closed up to the back of him. It was a bit of a better effort last time. Still 0.8 of a second lost to Mats Lindemann. So that Nissan really struggling for pace in these last stages of moments. Does look like it's maybe suffered a bit of damage on the front end, so that may not be helping his race. But with Lindemann looking fairly quick, and you'd have to imagine that Gregor is going to immediately stretch his legs in this free air after making that fantastic move, that he could very likely close up onto the back of the top 10 and see if he can get himself a top 10 finish. As Dalking's got a drive-through penalty. So after such a sort of a patient and calm drive, Darking has got himself a penalty. So that's going to promote some of these guys up behind him, and that's very disappointing from his point of view. He was looking good to self after Kieran Prendergast, but now that's effectively him dropped well down the order. And we said that the penalties around here could be just as much of a deciding factor as the sort of general battling on track, and it's definitely proving to be the case here. So another victim of the very tricky track limits here at Zolder.
He's just answering Anton's question from the chat. He's asking about championship standings. If my maths are correct, and history shows they're very likely aren't, George Buffy is now extending his championship lead by around 20 points on Jardia in second place. But the big change will be Niels, who, winning this race, will gain 100 points, definitely go past Malinowski, who sadly had to retire and will not gain any points today. I'm not quite sure. I think Niels might be very close to Jardia and challenge him for P2, but I don't think he's going to take second place in the championship today if things end as they stand now. But of course, the 25 minutes ago, a lot can happen, and a lot will happen, this being an 8-hour race. So nothing settled yet.
No, absolutely. In the meantime, Darking served his drive-through straight away. We just hopped on board with George Boothby, who is maybe looking to extend that championship lead by just a bit more, as he has really come alive over these last couple of laps and put Trevor under all sorts of pressure. You can see the difference in approaches there. George a lot more aggressive as he goes through the chicane. He's going to head towards the inside. It's going to be a very difficult move to pull off. We saw Gregor do it. Can George Boothby do the same thing as he heads down towards the chicane? It's going to be tricky side by side with the McLarens. Oh, that was so close. Trevor barely gave him enough room, and he's still got to worry about that McLaren on his gearbox as they're nose to tail through turn 8 there. Not sure if George will be able to get enough of a run on him. Does he think about a dive bomb towards the hairpin? He looks down the inside, but he backs out of it. Have to try and make that move again. That was very good defending there from Trevor. He couldn't stop George from getting down the inside of him there, but he did manage to defend it just long enough, although they're heading towards the final chicane. Does George think about it here? We haven't seen a move towards that final chicane just yet, but for the time being, not able to do anything, and Trevor holds on once more as Nils continues to put in 27s on the board, and no one else besides Jardier actually, 28.0 on that last lap. Gregor should come over the line shortly as well, so a couple of guys sort of on the outskirts of 27s, but yeah, right now the main action on the circuit, definitely this battle between George Boothby and Trevor Wenham. And I got so close there, but it was a good, clean, fair fight through there. We've seen it all fall apart for quite a few drivers. The vast majority of drivers have had things go very wrong in that sequence of corners. But again, I think Trevor Wenham has maybe reached his 3 warnings limit, and if he gets one more warning, then he'll be getting a drive-through, because he's just exercising so much more caution through that chicane, whereas George, maybe he's just been a bit more patient during the race, and now he's really looking to try to throw everything at that chicane. And you can see every time they head through there, he just gains a little bit more ground, and then after a few laps, he's firmly locked onto the gearbox of that McLaren ahead of him. So I have to see if George can do anything. Still over 20 minutes this race to go, so plenty of time and plenty of laps to make an opportunity happen. Won't be quite happening for George just yet, but Trevor Wenham definitely under all sorts of pressure trying to hold on to that P2 position at the moment.
A bit further down the grid, the only other battle going on right now, Lyndon Anderson trying to chase down Petrushenko for P9. Anderson dropping back a bit on the last lap, on the current lap, sorry, but looking good for a move any second now. But of course now behind them, benefiting from their battle, is Gregor, who
sorry to cut you off there. I think there was I'm not sure exactly what happened, but Trevor Wenham lost the position to George there. I've just gone back on the replay. In turn 1, Trevor went wide at turn 1 there, and finally the pressure from George Boothby forced him into a mistake, and that has allowed Boothby to get through into P2. So that helps his championship out just that bit more, and will be benefiting him as they head towards the finale. But Trevor Wenham then not able to sustain that level of pressure for that long. We saw kind of the struggle that he was having through certain parts of the lap, and eventually it was just a bit too much for him to have to try to hold on to that position. But yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly now the closest battle on track, as you rightly say, is this all-three-way tussle. Gregor got a huge oversteer moment there on the exit of turn 4. He is definitely pushing, and Lyndon Anderson weaving as they head towards the chicane. What sort of exit does he get? It's not great. You can see the sort of the pace difference that Gregor has on these guys. He does seem a lot more confident, and he just closes up so much through this section. On the previous lap, he gained, I think, 2/10 in this section alone, and again, Gregor really pushing on, and now he doesn't have a great deal to lose. He still has to be careful about the warnings, but you know, effectively his warning tally has been reset, so he's got 3 more warnings that he can afford to get in what would have been about 25-minute period since his drive-through penalty. So he'll definitely be looking to maybe make use of those a little bit to try to help his chances. And you can see how this gap goes back and forth during the lap. He closes up a huge amount during that really fiddly section through turn 7, but then in the latter stages of the sector, the McLaren really does start to lock onto the gearbox of that Nissan Alova again, as Petrushenko getting a little bit wide through turn 1 there, but gets good drive. And if anything, maybe over the next sequence of corners, we know how fast Gregor is in the middle part of the lap. If he can set up a good few corners here as he carries a great deal of speed through turn 4, how close is Lyndon Anderson to the Nissan of Petrushenko? Can't do anything yet, but what about that BMW behind Gregor? Getting a really good run through there, but doesn't look like it's going to be able to carry the momentum. I thought he might get the cutback for a second, but not quite able to make it happen. See some great flames coming out the back of the imposter McLaren here, but Gregor not able to do anything just yet. But he's generally in these battles remained very patient, and you'd have to say that right now the pace is definitely in his favour in comparison to these 2 cars ahead of him.
You can just see the confidence that Gregor can take the curbs with, just doing a wheelie through the chicane. He just can take the corner so aggressively, and the McLaren just simply can't do it. So that's where he gets his advantage from. He's now through the Jackie X chicane. Not that good of an exit, but of course the BMW just doesn't have the acceleration that the McLaren does. Falling back just that bit, but I would imagine he can line up another try through the next few corners. I just wanted to try to pronounce them, but I gave up halfway through.
It's definitely one of the more awkward circuits for corner names, there's no doubt about that, but I think this is the closest that Linham Anderson has been during the last few laps, and he is very much on the back of the gearbox of that Nissan. What sort of momentum can he take through the chicane? Oh, that was a very poor exit from Linham Anderson, and he's actually going to come under pressure from Gregor Schill potentially. But it just again, Gregor, he manages to get alongside. That's twice in a row now, but he ends up being so caught up over those curves, particularly on that second apex, because of how much of a tight line he's on. He just can't quite get the exit speed as they then head towards turn 7, but he is locked onto the back of this McLaren. Does he think about a move down the inside? He thinks about faking it, but not able to make Linham Anderson take the bait. Anything that he can do into this final sequence of corners, but this back and forth is brilliant. You see, I think Petrochenko is definitely the one that's struggling for pace the most. Linham Anderson definitely has some good pace as well, although that's a little bit of a mistake there from him. Is that going to give Gregor Schill the opportunity that he needs in order to make an overtake? That straight line speed in the McLaren is very, very strong. Again, every time he gets alongside, just not able to make the move stick. And this is the sort of back and forth that's so brilliant to watch in GT3s. You have the cars that are strong over the curves, that are strong under acceleration, braking, top speed, and different types of corners, sort of mid-speed, low-speed, high-speed, and this dynamic around somewhere like Zolder, where we've got a really great variety of these corners. It's exactly what we're seeing with this trio of cars here. The Nissan, one of the best on the straights. McLaren, great at high-speed cornering. Oh, huge mistake! That was a very, very late braking there from Gregor Schill. He made the chicane there, unless that was just purely a mistake from Linham Anderson. I think I want to see that again. I didn't go quite far back enough on the replay, unfortunately, but maybe that was just a mistake from Linham Anderson. I thought that Gregor would run deep.
Wasn't a mistake. Actually, he wanted to take the corner and didn't expect Gregor to come just flying towards the apex. So he just, backed out and gave up the position for now in favor of not having a massive crash.
Yeah, I mean, that was very curious there, because Gregor did completely make the chicane, so he didn't carry a ridiculous amount of speed in. But yeah, I think absolutely he was. He definitely did seem to close up the distance to Linham Anderson extremely quickly. So yes, that's a difficult one to call, because there wasn't contact, and arguably because of the avoiding action that the Linham Anderson took, it's very difficult to penalise something on a what-if basis, because there was never actually an incident that took place. So Gregor might get away with that one, and Linham Anderson, I imagine, will be quite frustrated, and maybe he'll appeal any sort of form of decision after the race. But yeah, a very curious incident there through that chicane, but that has allowed Gregor to push on to try to take that position away from Petrochenko, who has valiantly been holding on in that Nissan GTR. Definitely not a car that is particularly known for its strong showing of pace, but he's done well to kind of maintain a top 10 position so far during this race. Just looking around a bit at other points in the order, McCormack has shown some good pace in this stint, and he's not a million miles away from Votnayer, and he should get the position from Votnayer actually, because there's a 10-second penalty that Votnayer will have to have applied at the end of his race. And what's the gap to Kieran Prendergast? I think it's a bit too much potentially of a gap for Kieran to benefit from that penalty of Votnayer, but maybe if McCormack and Votnayer start battling and Prendergast just puts in clean, consistent laps like he has done all race, he might gain an extra position out of this. So even if he's a bit on his own for the time being, it's definitely not quite over for his race just yet. As checking back in on this battle for P9, Linham Anderson still firmly, in actual fact, looking to almost get a run on Gregor. I don't think he's going to be able to do anything about it just yet. How do they fare through the chicane? Gregor again jumping the curb absolutely massively like a kangaroo there through the chicane. Petrochenko going defensive towards turn 7. So you think about holding the inside, he doesn't cover it, and Gregor backs out. There was a little bit of sort of squeezing there. I think Gregor may have even lifted slightly, still locked onto the rear of that Nissan. And that Nissan has been suffering, and Linham Anderson, especially after maybe not being quite so happy about how he lost the position to Gregor. Gregor thinks about a bit of a weave there. Oh, that's tricky. That's tricky, Gregor, because you've got a car right behind you. You can't weave in the braking zone. And yeah, Linham Anderson flashing his lights there a bit at Gregor, and I think understandably so. That was in the very dying moments of the braking zone. That was quite aggressive weaving there from Gregor as he tried to fake a move on Petrochenko. So maybe not all said and done in terms of these positions after the race as well, because that's a couple of instances now that Gregor has sort of been a little bit maybe in the grey area for, but enough grey areas, and the stewards might have to start thinking of giving him a penalty.
You also have to applaud Petrochenko's defending here, the widest Nissan on Earth currently on this track. Not any weaving, any weird moves, just brilliant defending and not giving Gregor any opportunity at all. So Gregor still has to rely on just yeeting it through those chicanes, taking as much curb as possible. And yeah, Petrochenko not making his day any easier.
Oh, it's a huge jump again!
And that cost him on the exit. He just doesn't have the speed on the exit because he loses traction every time.
Oh, Petrochenko barely gives him room.
Absolutely brilliant battle we see here for P9.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that Nissan, every time Gregor gets alongside him, you know, I said that the Nissan is just one of those cars it's such a beast down the straights. The previous generations, admittedly, but this car wasn't called Godzilla for no reason. It's an absolute monster down some of these straights, and Gregor gets an incredible run on the exit of that chicane every single lap with his very creative and flamboyant line through there, and every time he gets alongside and just the torque in that Nissan and its straight line speed performance, just yeah, Petrochenko with his wise defending, using the car to its maximum in not just in width but in also the places of the track where it's going to be good. He's just putting on a brilliant sort of masterclass in defending here, and Gregor just cannot get past him. Again, in areas with these medium speed corners is where the BMW is particularly strong, but then they get to this next straight and the legs on the Nissan just start to eke out that gap a bit. How much curve does Gregor attack with this time? Again, a huge amount, but I think that was actually a slightly weaker line than what he's had before. He's got to be careful about the amount of warnings as well, because although those lines are very interesting for us to watch, I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, as he makes a bit of a mistake there through that sequence in turn 7. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those have translated to warnings, and he's already suffered one drive-through this race. He certainly doesn't want to get another one, although with only just over 10 minutes on the clock, he will be getting increasingly frustrated about not being able to make this move happen. You know, in the interest potentially of the team championship as well, even if it's not maybe not the main focus of the series, but it's definitely still an important aspect for these guys. We've got two big hitters in esports for first and second in the team championship, Yassi versus BS Plus competition. So it's still a nice bit of bragging rights that either one of those teams would like to have over the other. As he makes another mistake going wide on the exit of turn 1 there, and you know, his laps are running out, and with these mistakes, again, he's really pushing the limits. He's definitely throwing everything sort of at this track and really attacking it, but he's got to be careful not to attack it too hard.
Yeah, he's starting to convert those, finding the track limit and working on the edge of the track limit. He's starting to convert it into exceeding the track limit this time he takes the curb very cautiously. So maybe he's just on the third warning right now after a few laps where he went all in trying to get past Petrushenko. And I wouldn't be surprised if Petrushenko manages to hold on to that position here through just brilliant defending so far. But maybe Gregor will try another move in the next few laps. He still has around 5 laps to go to try something.
Yeah, there's definitely still opportunity here for Gregor to do something, but yeah, time is definitely running out, and we've seen that Gregor clearly has the better pace, or maybe even a little bit of a nudge there through the final chicane. But yet again, it clearly for Gregor to be able to make this move, he needs to be very firmly alongside that Nissan as he gets very close again. Going through turn 1 a little bit wide for Petrushenko, acutely aware of how fast that BMW is through the sequence of corners. And every time, because Gregor's line is always compromised whenever he gets alongside him, and as soon as it's compromised, we get close again. Gregor actually had to back out the throttle a little bit there, and maybe will even be a little bit vulnerable to Linham Anderson, who's looking to try to go towards the outside. We've seen it go all wrong in this chicane before, and there'll be no love lost between these guys at this corner as Gregor flies over chicane, actually goes a little bit wide on the exit, and again that's a chunk of time that he'll have to make up. Linham Anderson firmly locked onto the gearbox of Gregor again, but Gregor just never able to really, showcase the pace that he's got in that car, because every time he gets alongside the Nissan, he's been compromised in some sort of form or another, because he's either having to do a cutback over the curves and he loses momentum, or he's taking a different line, and in doing that he loses that bit of momentum and then it just becomes a drag race, and the Nissan is just so much faster in acceleration and top speed that the BMW just rarely has the opportunity to really hang with the Nissan. And again, another lap goes by, and another time that Petrushenko holds on to the position. So fantastic driving from him to withstand that pressure, but yeah, Gregor definitely making mistakes.
It's actually an interesting turn of events. Now Gregor falling back a lot, and now I think the key battle right now is Linham Anderson against Gregor instead of Gregor against Petrushenko. But of course, behind Anderson we still have Gölz, although he has the 25-second penalty still to serve, who is in turn under threat from Merlis. So maybe we will see either of them get involved in this battle. With 6 minutes to go, I think in the last few positions there's still a lot to play for. And of course we have to remember, with the point system of AOR, this is still a lot of points we are looking at here. So it's not like Formula 1 where after P10 you gain nothing. They're currently fighting for P9. That's the 47 points, which is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a huge difference maker. Also, Hugo Moles has been lapping pretty quickly relative to these guys, so he's certainly closing up onto the back of Gault, so we might see him make a move. We saw I think he got a penalty after being involved in an incident where he ended up going off the track as well, so he's looking to try to make up some ground. But yeah, this train of cars is definitely where the action is at the moment. Just to answer one of the questions in the chat, where have all the drivers gone? Well, there's a mixture of reasons for that. I think we started with 23 cars this evening, and whilst we had a fairly clean opening sort of 10 minutes or so, we saw incidents of people dropping down. We've seen plenty of drive-throughs. There's been some drivers have accumulated a fairly substantial amount of penalties. Oh, was a bit of a moment there from Petrushenko, and Gregor Schill actually had to get on the brakes there on the exit. He tried carrying the momentum, but he just got a face full of Nissan, and again, despite making the mistake, Petrushenko somehow holds on to that position. So he's holding on to that P9 brilliantly, and the laps are still going as the clock ticks on down. But yeah, in terms of drivers, we've lost a few for a variety of reasons, and in terms of the sort of the most notable drivers that we've lost in thinking in terms of the championship, Malinowski ended up being involved in a couple of incidents. I think he got some penalties as well, and eventually decided to retire the car. We saw Darking, who started at the very back of the grid, put in a really solid drive and was looking to probably challenge towards top 10. And then he got a drive-through penalty. He decided to retire. Seen the likes of Sam Fock, he was involved in incidents. Matis Lateo, he was frankly bullied out of this race. He was just hit by just about every single car that came close to him, and eventually I think he also then got a drive-through penalty of his own, so he decided to retire from this race. So there's been a mixture of reasons as to why we've lost so many cars. So it just shows you that for these guys that have been soldering on through this race, and especially the ones that have been locked in some of these really intense battles, sort of how much it takes out of you to really try to keep this level of concentration the further we descend into the darkness, as Petchenko again not giving Gregor an opportunity, and there'll only be a couple of laps left for him to make a move. Where is Niels at the moment? So, oh, Niels is Niels is almost coming around to lap these guys. That's the difference in that's the difference between first and ninth. The pace that Niels has had, throughout this entire race has been frankly untouchable. He was behind Trevor in the early stages, but as soon as he got released, he has just been in an absolute class of his own. And yeah, you can see visibly how that's affected where he is about roughly on the track relative to these other guys. So I think there'll be a couple more laps for these guys to battle, but yeah, a very, very interesting series of closing stages for this race.
We actually haven't talked about Niels for quite some time now, which just shows how far ahead he is. Now 12-second lead to George in P2, still consistently putting out 127s. Only guy on the grid to do so right now. He's just incredibly fast. Feels almost bad to not talk about him anymore, but just driving on his own right now in P1. And we still have this very exciting battle going on for P9. Gregor again on the back of Petrushchenko.
That's going to be close again. Not able to make it work, but he might get a good run out of this next series of corners. Absolutely locked onto the rear of that Nissan, but that Nissan again is just gonna drive away from him as they head towards the hairpin. Gregor getting a little bit of weaving in towards the braking zone. Got to be careful. As Linham Anderson right behind him as well. Dominic Gultz coming under increasing pressure from Hugo Merles as well. Merles not able to do anything just yet, but this trio of cars has really closed up, and Linham Anderson has just been sitting here patiently the entire time. And these guys will have, I think, will this be their last lap? Because Niels Narks is going to, he's just started his final lap. So no, these guys will effectively have 2 more laps actually, to battle on as they are still ahead of Niels. But Linham Anderson actually the one that's really putting Gregor Schiller under pressure, so this might just give Petrushchenko the breathing room he needs, but then again, the BMW just carries so much speed during some of these medium speed corners. He's able to run away from the McLaren almost immediately. How much of a run does he get through the chicane? Again, not great, and he's just perhaps being a little bit more cautious now through that chicane. I think maybe he used up some of his warnings. Flash of the lights there, just trying to put the Nissan off, as Linham Anderson has dropped back a bit and is now under pressure from the likes of Gultz and Merles. Gultz a little bit out of this race, has a 25-second penalty that will be added to his time. But Gregor Schill then effectively not being pursued at the moment, and it will be one more lap for Petrushchenko to try to hold on to this, but a battle that is raging on all the way to the end. And speaking of the end, that's the point that we find ourselves in as Niels Narks comes into the chicane for one final time. It has been an absolute class drive from him, a showcase of a dominant performance if I've ever seen one, and he will cross the line to win round 7 here of the Apex Online Racing Sprint League in Tier 1 at Zolder, as George Butherby will come across the line for P2. Good showing from him, and then it will be P3 for Trevor Wenham. Looked like he had a good chance in the early stages of the race, but wasn't quite able to maintain it to the end, but a good solid result from him. This action's still going on. Oh, Petrchenko, that was a bit deep there going to chicane. Has he maybe handed an opportunity to Gregor for the first time in a long time? He's having to defend as they head towards turn 7 there. There's contact on the way down. There's contact again. Petrchenko trying to hold on to that position. It's getting very messy now. Gregor cutting across the gravel trap. Petrchenko trying to come back down the inside towards him. There's going to be very, very... Oh, there's contact. Oh. Gregor's off. Petrchenko's off as well. Gregor Schill has actually held on to it, but Petrchenko, after battling to hold on to that position for so long, ends up with several pieces of contact. Then Gregor Schill goes very deep there. I think that was a mistake. I don't think he's planning on letting these cars by. And he's now lost at least one position to Linnam Anderson, who was just waiting for something to happen. And I think Gregor Schill has actually backed off to let Petrchenko pass, which, if he has, a great amount of racing respect there. And maybe just... Oh, he's got a drive-through penalty as well on the final lap of the race. So Gregor, really kind of unfortunate final lap for him. But it does look like, yeah, Petrchenko is going to reclaim that position as Gregor lets him pass. That was such a shame on the final lap, and after such a brilliant, intense series of battling between these guys, it all ends up in a bit of tears there. But at least nice to see there from Gregor the respect to hand that position back on the final lap of the race.
Yeah, very well done from him. I think this accident was a long time coming, but still brilliant battle between the three. Brilliant race altogether from everyone involved.
Yeah, without a doubt. And yes, a shame it ended a little bit like that in the end, but that was definitely an exciting race. And considering Zolder, we said, you know, the weather isn't particularly exciting, the track doesn't necessarily lend itself to overtaking, but in a way that actually ended up contributing the other way, and it led to a combination of incidents, some brilliant side-by-side action at times, and a fantastic bit of back and forth between some of these drivers. But that will be it then for this race. So Niels Narks wins and takes a dominant victory, 12 seconds in the end. As soon as he was released, he was just absolutely in a class of his own. George Busby finishing in P2. Trevor Wenham finishing P3, maybe not where he wanted to be at the end of that. Jardier, a good sort of bit of damage limitation from him to go from P11 to 4th place, so minimising that loss to George Busby in the championship. Shermatinsky, strong showing from him, maybe some incidents to review for him with the stewards. I have to see how that plays out, but provisionally P5, and someone that will take immediate advantage of that is Darren McCormack, if there aren't any penalties, just finishing 1.5 seconds behind Shermatinsky. Max Watnire having that 10-second penalty added to his lap time sees him drops P7. Kieran Prendergast, a strong showing from him to finish in P8. Linnam Anderson, a very back and forth race for him, but able to take good advantage of that very interesting final lap with Gregor Schill and Petrchenko to get himself up into P9. Hugo Merle's a great recovery from him as well after incidents and mistakes that he had in the earlier stages. And then just outside the top 10 after such a valiant effort, Petrchenko will be very disappointed with how that race ended. He will finish in P11. Dominic Galtz in P12. Gregor Schill with 2 drive-throughs during that race. I think the only driver to accumulate 2 drive-through penalties, but you could see how hard he was pushing. It's those warnings, I think, gathered purely through the kangaroo-like antics through that chicane. Will finish in P13. Jan-Marcel Dietrich in P14. He was the last of our finishes with the likes of Darking, Lateo, who I feel incredibly sorry for after this race, Samir Fock, Steve Falver, Maseo Malnowski, and unfortunately that is where my board ends, so I can't see... we also had the likes of Valentine Barrier, Briat Wonko, and Remy Papin, who DNF'd from the race. Not maybe as many finishers as we would have liked, but definitely an exciting race nonetheless.
And I think we have Niels ready for an interview.
Oh, how fantastic. Let's move him in.
Good evening, Niels. First off, big congratulations on the win. Fantastic win. Dominant win.
That was the question? Yes. Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely stellar showing from you, Niels. I mean, how was that race from your perspective? Obviously, kind of the early stages, maybe just trying to exercise a little bit of patience, but I mean, once you got into the lead, you were absolutely in a class of your own. So what was it like, sort of behind the wheel, and kind of what was your mentality in that sort of initial phase of the race?
Yeah, I mean, so going into this race, I knew 60-something points gap to Boothby, so I knew I have to finish in front of him, else it's pretty much over. But for 90 minutes, I had to take a bit more care. Was a bit upset with qualifying, to be honest. There was more in it. In those situations, you really have to put it on pole when the car has the potential, but I kind of didn't put it together. Invalidated the last attempt, so I was lucky to stay in second there with, I think, 2 other guys being just a couple thousandths behind or so, and starting fourth would probably been a lot worse. And then starting second, I was really just hoping for the McLarens to have a bit of a bottoming out issue, because they're known to be really stiff as a car in general, no matter how soft you set the suspension. So I knew at some point a gap would open, and luckily it took only 10 or 15 laps, felt forever, when Trevor did his first mistake out of 2 or so, I think. And I was able to kind of go alongside. I think we left each other fair space in the second chicane there. But you also see no cars would ever fit alongside there on the actual track if it wasn't for the huge runoff. However, I think it was fair what we both did there, and from there I was hoping to pull a bit of a bigger gap. Thought I had more pace, but in the first stint I just didn't find my rhythm as I was hoping. And after the stops, then I got more confident. Sooner or later, had a tiny mistake there, throwing away the initial gap I had, but then I was able to really find my rhythm, get into that flow, repeat lap after lap how I wanted to. And then I was able to open the gap. I was a bit sad when Boothby came from third to second, because it just makes my life even harder going into the last race. But still, good race, end of the day.
Yeah.
Hope that was what you're looking for.
Yeah, without a doubt, it was. Quite clearly, once you found yourself in that position, you were just the absolute dominant class of the field, no doubt. And speaking of the next race, obviously, like I say, going into that finale, George Boothby, you've narrowed that margin down just a bit, but sort of how are you feeling going into Silverstone? Obviously a track that's notoriously a bit more favourable towards the McLarens. BMW M4 sort of pretty decent around there, I'd say. So sort of how much of a fight do you think you can take to George there in the final to see if you can get that championship win?
I think I'll first ping Toby Pepper, because he was uploading like a world record in the BMW there earlier. Maybe making snag a setup from him or so. Get a bit of a heads up. I think the BMW might be on par. I know it's rather quick around there, but I'm lacking an actual comparison so far. So I'm hoping we're on pace, and if that's the case, I'll try the same as today, and get a pole, and then see from there.
Yeah, it's always a case of I think being, especially at this level in sim racing, you have to be a perfectionist. So kicking yourself after the qualifying session and immediately wanting just those extra few thousandths maybe to eke out the pole position next time, it's an understandable mentality to have. But an absolutely extraordinary performance from you today, and I think that we would certainly like to see that you be able to take that battle to the likes of George and Jardier in that finale, and see what sort of battle we can have for the championship in the closing stages. So again, congratulations on a brilliant race today, and thank you for joining us in the comms box for an interview as well. We don't tend to get too many interviews, so it's always nice when we have one. But yeah, great stuff today, Niels, and best of luck next week.
Thanks a lot, then hopefully we'll see you in the interview booth one more time.
Yeah, we hope so too.
Bye.
Thanks, Niels. Well, hearing from our race winner today, and yeah, current, I think, on the back of that race, did we in your sort of provisional points calculation, do we think Niels is currently sitting in P2?
He's actually 15 points behind Jardia right now in P3.
Okay.
46 points to George in the lead. But yeah, especially that point difference between Jardia and Niels will be very interesting. Malinowski, sadly, because of his DNF today, dropped back a lot. Don't think he will be able to really challenge for the lead anymore. But as you mentioned today a lot, it's the AOR League, and we've seen a lot of crazy things happen so far over the last 7 races, including today. It's definitely going to be a very, very exciting race, very exciting season final, and I would recommend everyone to tune in next week.
Yeah, without a doubt. It was an extraordinary race today with a lot of incidents, and it's left us with quite an exciting prospect going into that finale. And interestingly enough, I don't think a position that we've been in with AOR Tier 1 before, where the championship leader still has not won a single race. So I'm sure that George will maybe be looking to try to finish the championship on a particular high, and maybe seeing if he can edge out Niels in that final race and see if he can finally take a race win. I think Niels is on 2 now. I think he took 1 earlier on in the season. So George definitely will be looking to try to get that top place trophy if he can before his season ends, but obviously his priorities will be in trying to maintain his position in the championship. But yes, absolutely, in terms of the action for next week. Before that, though, we also have the Tier 2 League tomorrow evening, starting at 7:30 UK time, GMT again. I will be presenting that with Tim, so you will also have me to listen to for the second day in a row. And next week we will be back on Monday for Tier 1 for the finale of this championship, and we'll have to see who ends up presenting that race. Hopefully Rage continues some of his recovery, suffering a little bit illness-wise at the moment. But one way or another, there is a great deal of action to look forward to on that front, and I think we are definitely going to be in for a treat next week. But for tonight then, doesn't look like we'll have any more interviews, so we will look to wrap up there. So thank you everybody so much for watching and tuning in, and hopefully see you all again soon. Tetra, thank you very much for joining me in the comms box tonight. Hopefully an enjoyable debut for you as well.
Yeah, very, very glad to be able to join you for today. Very glad I got to commentate this race. And also from my side, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, John, for enduring the terrible German accent. And
not terrible at all. It's, and we were equally poor at name pronunciation as well as corner pronunciation. So I think, regardless of English or German accents, I think we're pretty level on that side of things. But yeah, and also some nice comments in the chat as well, supporting you on your debut as well. So it's a really nice there as well. But yep, that will be it then for today's race. Thank you so much everybody for watching, and we will see you again for Tier 2 tomorrow night, and then back again for the final of this championship of Tier 1 next Monday. But for now,